they're different, a very clear stumbling block to getting to where they're trying to get to. So for Josh, it's just he has yet to show us the ability to have a start to finish great regular season, which would then allow you to, for the first time ever, have a bye or home field advantage, to not be playing these brutally tough playoff games in round 2 that have been knocked him out of the playoffs, right? But he has the resume of maybe the second best quarterback in the league, but because of not being able to do it from September to January, it's not crystal clear. For Lamar, it's very different than that, because you can make a case that from September to January, Lamar's the best quarterback in the league.
Yeah, you want to see the case?
Yeah, let me see it.
First 6 years as a starter. Regular season, Lamar is number 1.
Yeah.
A 753 win percentage. Problem when we get to the playoffs, unfortunately, is 2-4. Yeah. He's got 2 MVPs. So if you want to say he's the GOAT, regular season GOAT, you can get pretty close to it.
And to be fair, he doesn't quite have a better regular season win percentage than Mahomes, but he has the 2 MVPs, and people would argue he didn't have, at least the beginning of his career, the supporting cast Mahomes had the beginning of his, he had to play his rookie season, which took some, which Mahomes didn't have to deal with. But it's then, so now we can put up my graphic, because this is what works against him. He is in the regular season, just throw out his rookie year because it's unfair to him. I'm just using passer rating because Lamar does more than that. Obviously he has, but even just passer rating, he's 6th in the whole league. And then in the playoffs drops all the way to 21st. So for Lamar, before you can have any of these discussions, because Wilds, if you were to say, other than Mahomes, what quarterback would you like to have on your team for this coming regular season?
Me?
Yeah.
Drake May, probably, okay. But then probably Lamar.
Lamar, right? Yeah. It's a legitimate. But if I were to say to you, you have a playoff game this weekend, I think I would take Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Stroud.
I can't say Stroud. He just beat Stroud.
Okay,
Stroud's hype needs to. Everyone put Stroud over Lamar, and I love C.J. Stroud. The guy won the MVP. They played head-to-head, and he beat him. He beat him twice.
All right, so let's take Stroud off it. That's fine. I disagree. I think Stroud in 1 year has as many great playoff games as Lamar has in his career. But take Stroud off it. That's fine. If Goff, Jordan Love, Baker, in a playoff game, Baker has 3 times as many excellent playoff games as Lamar does. Stafford, no question. Dak, I would rather have in a playoff game.
Okay, let's hit the brakes. Let's hit.
What's the argument? What's the argument against it? What's the argument against there being 10? That's the problem. There's 10 guys in this league that if you were told, at least for me, I was told we have a playoff game this weekend, who can I pick at quarterback that I would name before I name Lamar Jackson?
The numbers aren't kind to him in the playoffs. Hopefully it's just small sample size. I mean, it's 6 games. But
6 games, not that small. Playoff games.
Kind of small.
Who would you rather have in a playoff game this year, Jalen Hurts or Lamar?
I like Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the problem is the dichotomy between it. Because over the course of a regular season, other than Mahomes, you could say Lamar is the clear-cut number 1 draft pick. But over the course of a postseason, I think there's a third of the league you'd rather have.
All right, so...
Okay, so he's being very... I understand what he's saying, and this is where we always cook the books with these stats. Like, to use Baker Mayfield as an example. Guys, Baker Mayfield's 2 playoff wins were against the Eagles and the Steelers, okay? The Steelers were a disaster in that game. It was like turnover after turnover after turnover. Their defense was atrocious. Ben Roethlisberger was awful. That game was one of the most disastrous, comically, hilariously absurd games ever. And because of that boosts up Baker Mayfield's stats and a playoff win. Go watch that game. There was nothing impressive of what Baker Mayfield did there. Nothing. I don't care what you have to say. It's just inaccurate. And then he played the Eagles this last season, where the Eagles were losing to every team under the sun. Nick Wright's own words said that the Eagles were the worst team in the NFL at that time. So why is Baker Mayfield beating the worst team in the NFL and putting up numbers impressive? It's not. It's not impressive at all. Not to mention, Baker Mayfield could have had like 3 or 4 interceptions in that playoff game against the Eagles, but the Eagles were just a disaster. And so many of the yards were yards after catch, after contact. I mean, it was comically hilarious. They could not tackle. They had like the most missed tackles. It was just an absurd game by the Eagles. To then use that as a way to boost up Baker Mayfield, to bring down Lamar Jackson, is just absurd. That's why stats lie all the time. Okay, you can't just look at surface level stats. And the problem is this is fresh in the memory, but once you get a few years down the road, it's hard to remember exactly what happened in that Pittsburgh Steelers game. I remember it because I watched it, and I was excited to watch that game, and I was with my cousin, and I was like, all right, let's go. And it was a disaster game. It was like, what the heck am I watching here? I think that game was the first game that they'd used, like the Nickelodeon game, if memory serves me correctly. Where it was like they had like the weird graphics, and I was like, all right, we can watch it in this style. I think it was that game. I'm not positive, but I remember watching that game and I was excited for it. And it was just like a disaster from the get-go. And I remember thinking, oh great, this is going to make Baker Mayfield look better than he actually is, and people are going to talk about it and say, see, Baker Mayfield's amazing. Now he held his own against, ironically, against the Chiefs, so I'll give him credit for that. But besides that, I just think it's unfair. And I am a firm believer, and I've said this again and again and again. Listen, Lamar Jackson is not perfect, right? He's not. He's made mistakes, especially in the playoffs. But his team and his coaching staff have completely failed him. They just have. They don't put him in a situation to succeed like Andy Reid does for Patrick Mahomes. They just don't. And I'm not saying that you need to have an Andy Reid or that you need to have a Travis Kelce or a Tyreek Hill or whoever. But the reality is that the Ravens comically have an awful game plan going into the playoffs. And it's not all on Lamar. I do not think Lamar has the ability to dictate the game to fit his own needs, to win. I do not think that. I think Lamar Jackson, with his skill set and his level of expertise, he needs to have a great coach to drive the ship. He needs to almost kind of be like a puppet, because he can be his own worst enemy in that regard. He needs to be a puppet and needs to have a coach that can really pull the strings. That's how Goff is successful. That's how Brock Purdy is successful. So it's not a slight. It's not such a negative. People will see that and be like, I can't believe you said that about Lamar Jackson. Some players have the ability to really dictate the game as they see fit. That's Tom Brady. That's Peyton Manning. That's not Josh Allen. That's not Lamar Jackson. That's not Jalen Hurts. And some of these other younger up-and-coming quarterbacks like the C.J. Strouds and the Jordan Loves, that remains to be seen. I'm not even so sure it's Patrick Mahomes. That is the problem when you have a Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid combo. Because Andy Reid is a literal offensive super genius. It's his brilliant play calling and play design. He calls the perfect play at the perfect time. That's how they beat the Ravens. That's how they beat the Bills. That's how they beat the 49ers to win the Super Bowl. It was great execution by Patrick Mahomes. No ifs, ands, or buts. And Patrick Mahomes' greatness as well. But Andy Reid puts him in the perfect situation. And then Patrick Mahomes executes it. So again, I'm not trying to take away any credit from Patrick Mahomes. You guys always see those comments as like me hating on Patrick Mahomes. I think Patrick Mahomes is one of the greatest quarterbacks I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm not hating. But you have to understand that those things matter more than ever come time playoffs. It's just the reality. So I don't put that blame on Lamar Jackson, because they'll say, well, why does Lamar Jackson get the praise for during the regular season and none of the blame during the playoffs? Because it's so obvious that they're out-coached in the playoffs. It's very obvious. I don't think Harbaugh is maybe a top coach in the NFL. I really don't. I mean, I go back and forth on it, but I really think that he has probably... I think people see him as a notch too high, probably. He's probably closer to a McDermott than a Shanahan and an Andy Reid. Andy Reid's the next level. I think we put Harbaugh in... I think a lot of these people put Harbaugh in the category of a Shanahan, of a McVay, right? We have Andy Reid as the top, and then you have a bunch of these other really smart, hyper-intelligent coaches. And it's just that Harbaugh is on the defensive end while these other coaches are on the offensive end. I think considering what Lamar Jackson has done throughout the trajectory of his career, I think when you watch those playoff games, it's so obvious that they leave Lamar on an island. And they pretty much say, go figure it out. Go be great. Go be Lamar. And it's just brutal. You just can't win that way. You just can't. So I just think it's just not fair to put all on Lamar in that regard. I really don't. And I will die on that hill because it's so obvious that Lamar is a brilliant player and a great player. But I don't know if he's super cerebral. I think he's very instinctual, which again, it's not the worst thing. But I don't think he goes into a game with a true game plan mentality of like, this is how I'm going to attack. This is what I'm going to do. This is their weaknesses. This is their strengths. This is what we're going to do. It's more like he does play a very backyard style football because he is a freak of nature. And he can dominate by doing that. But when you are playing an elite defense like the Kansas City Chiefs, or an up-and-coming top defense with a fantastic defensive head coach like the Texans, you can run into those problems. Listen, the Ravens easily could have lost that game against the Texans. They really could have. It was a close game going into the second half. And don't get me wrong, the Texans the Ravens pulled away and won, but they could have lost that game. If you go back and watch, there was a few passes, a few interceptions, or that weren't I forget exactly. They were either intercepted or they weren't intercepted. That would have completely changed that game. Like, that's how football works. One play can be the difference between you being up by 3 touchdowns or being down by a touchdown. Like, football is very weird like that. You get these weird swings where, like, a fumble, an interception, a tipped pass, if it just bounces the other way, it completely changes everything. So I think even the box score for the Ravens game against the Texans was misleading. So I just think that the Ravens have to do a better job of putting Lamar in a better situation to succeed. If you're a big Lamar Jackson fan, let's just do this thought experiment. If Lamar Jackson played for the Chiefs, would he be a Super Bowl winner? The answer to me is an emphatic yes. If Lamar Jackson played for the Rams, would he be a Super Bowl winner? Yes. If Lamar Jackson played for the 49ers, would he be a Super Bowl winner? Yes. If Lamar Jackson played for, I could do this all day. And I think that's the problem when you look at, well, what's the fundamental problem with the Ravens? Yes, they can get the defense good, and that defense is very consistent, and Harbaugh is obviously a great defensive head coach. But it's obvious that having a team that's led defensively or a defensive head coach, it's very brutal to end up winning in the playoffs. And people will say, well, what about the Kansas City Chiefs? They had a defensive-led team. Yes, but they had the offensive genius and Patrick Mahomes to be able to bring it home, to be able to strategically design that offense and scheme and game plan in a way that allows the defense to lead, but then also set up the offense for success to ultimately win. That's not what the Ravens have ever shown to be able to do. And I blame Harbaugh. I don't put that blame on Lamar. I just don't. So I really think that if the Ravens underperform this season, I think they should move on from Harbaugh. I really, really do. I think just how they put like McCarthy on the hot seat and Dak on the hot seat and Sirianni on the hot seat and some of these other guys on the hot seat, I would put Harbaugh on the hot seat at this point. And I think to not have a consistent offensive identity, a consistent offensive mind for Lamar Jackson, I think when you have this great of a quarterback with this large of a skill set, it ends up really being tragic. And there's a reason why we see some of these great quarterbacks be so great when they have consistency, when they have a consistent offensive mind in the room. It's a lot easier to not have to keep switching. Even this season, it feels like what Lamar is going to do this season is going to be different from last season. It's just a hard way to get consistent football, to be consistently great. And so I think Lamar has done a lot considering the hand that he was dealt. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? Do you think it's on Harbaugh or Lamar in terms of their lack of success? Do you think Lamar could be recognized as one of the greatest QBs ever, as Harbaugh's vision is? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.